In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes we run through scenarios in our life and ask ourselves what would be different about us if a different set of circumstances had happened, if something had turned out a different way. Maybe if we had been born into a different family or had different parents or different relationships. And I think probably paramount with this, with a lot of people today, is their relationship with their dad. You know, it's easy to have a dad. It's a whole different thing for that dad to be a man. You know, just because someone is a dad and can produce children doesn't mean that he has embraced the role of being a man in his own life and being a father to the child. There's a great quote from one of the most, I think, prophetic films, Fight Club, which is, Tyler Durden says, if our fathers were our role models for God and our fathers didn't want us, what does that tell us about God? And the funny thing is that the first two propositions are accurate and the third one is a lie from the devil. When we see in the ministry of Christ, when he's talking about fathers, he continually is referencing the selfless, loving nature of fathers, because for people at that time, it's inconceivable that they would have had dads that didn't love their children, that weren't sacrificial. That is the definition of manhood. The definition of manhood is encapsulated in the person of Christ. And if you were to ask, what is the paramount feature of Christ's life? It's his sacrificialness, right? I mean, the fact that he was God who created the universe, and his famous saying is that he came to serve, not to be served. The nature of being a man is to lay down your life for those around you. And so often for many of us, we grew up in families where that just wasn't the case, you know? I grew up with a dad in the home, and I don't say this to put down my dad or to reveal his sins, but you know, he was emotionally absent. He had his own issues, his own struggles, the things that he was caught up with. This happens to a lot of us. And he just never really embraced the role of being a father, of embracing us, of embracing his children in a deep and an emotional way. And I was very bitter at him, very bitter, extremely resentful at him. In fact, I was really bitter into my 20s because I felt like I had lost out on a childhood. I knew that I had missed out on something that I believed to be desperately important to my formation. I felt that I had missed out on childhood. I had missed out on connection. I had missed out on being cultivated into a man. And the reality is that he didn't. It wasn't that he withheld something that he had. He just didn't have anything to give. He couldn't impart manhood to me because he didn't have that manhood in and of himself. And he couldn't love me as a sacrificial father because he was too weighed down by the burdens of his own life. And it's easy for me to think, or at the time when I was in my, mid-20s or so, and I was bitter and I was upset, for me to think that I had lost out on something. But there were two huge realities that came about because of it. Number one is I realized that I had a lot of emotional fuel, you could call it. I call this a kind of spiritual fuel for the spiritual rocket ship. You know, it takes somebody who's been damaged, who's been wounded, who has that kind of angst and instability inside of them to really want to pursue God. You know, it seems like there's always two types of people who pursue God. Those people who are very genuinely inclined towards the good and have a gentle spirit and kindness about them, which that's really not me at all. And those who are borderline stake raving mad and crazy and self-destructive and are filled with problems, that's me. And those people have this tremendous fuel and impetus inside of them to either completely blast off and explode in a, fiery blaze of self-destruction, or they can use and harness all of that angst and energy and discontentment and shove it into the spiritual rocket, light it on fire, and blast off towards God. And I think that's one of the keys, is if you don't have a father, you've got to find a father, but you'll never find it in men. There will always be something that's missing. Even with the men that I've been very close with, they've never replaced my dad. That's an impossibility. You have a certain closeness and a love and an intimacy there, but it's not the same. It's like a key that doesn't fit perfectly into the lock. But God fits there. So when you're missing your earthly father and you want to heal that wound, as I hear people saying about, there's nothing, in a sense, really to heal except to turn away from it. Because that person is not going to be the person that you wanted or needed them to be. So to continue investing in that, either through negative emotions or hopefulness or whatever, is really a waste of time. The goal should always be to turn all of that energy and that desire to be known to God. And since we have Christ, who's incarnate, who we see in the icons, who knows us, who walked with the fishermen, who talked with them and connected with them, it was very normal with them, we can know that we can have the same relationship with Christ as the fishermen had with him. It's on our end, as Christ says in the book of Revelation, behold, I stand at the door and knock. He's knocking on the door to our hearts. The question is, are we going to open up? Are we going to step into that kind of abyss? Are we going to put ourselves out there? That's number one. We have to heal the wound by turning away from the wound and turning towards Christ. If we don't do that, the wound becomes just an all-encompassing kind of black hole in our life, a festering kind of nothingness that we can't do anything with. You can stare at it for as long as you want and say, why didn't I have a dad? But the reality is like, that ship has sailed. Your childhood is gone. When I was in my 20s and I was looking at my life, it was like, my childhood is gone. That ship has sailed. Like, it's not coming back. Those years, those memories, none of that stuff is going to happen. And I think this leads to the second point, which is you can be for other people what you never had for yourself. And I mean, what I mean when I say that is like, when I put my boys to bed at night, like, this is just being honest, I hear a lot of like, you're the best dad in the world. Can I have a hug? Can I have another hug? There is a ton of warmth and affection from my sons when I put them to sleep. And it's like, this is stuff that I didn't grow up with that. Like, I didn't have that. I can't, in a sense, it's funny because I can't relate to their experience and how much love and connection that they have with me, their dad, because I didn't have that. But at the same time, it's like, they're the people that, the world that I wish had that, right? And so by changing my own behavior, by forgiving my dad, by working on all the self-destructive tendencies and dysfunctions and sins that I had in myself, by stepping into manhood and embracing it and embracing my role as a father, I'm able to give to them what nobody was able to give to me. And I'm okay with that. Like, it's not even that I'm okay with it. Like, I'm overjoyed by that. Like, I am like internally grateful that Christ turned my life around and that I was able to do, or I've been able to do something with it that has been good and healthy and normative and has been something I can pass on to my children that I am genuinely overjoyed about. I remember one time, I remember when I had my first son, this is like 12 years ago. I remember I had my first son and I was driving to work. I was working like 3 jobs at the time because like I just could not seem to make enough money, and they were all kind of part-time jobs, and I was working 3 jobs and felt like I was killing myself, working 6 days a week or whatever, sometimes 7 days a week to pay for everything. And I remember I was getting off this off-ramp to go to work, and I was sitting at the bottom of the off-ramp, and I was thinking about all my friends who went to prison and the people that I know who overdosed, like friends of mine, like close friends of mine who overdosed and died. And I just started I started weeping. I was bawling. I was bawling my eyes out at this stoplight because I realized I was there. I was there for the birth of my son. I was sober. I loved his mother. I was married to her. I wasn't locked up. I wasn't on probation. My life wasn't falling apart. All of these things were happening to the most unbelievable person who never thought anything like this would happen to them. And because of that, I can see it's all Christ. It's all Christ living and moving in me, giving me the life with my own children that I never even knew could exist. And I didn't have a model for it. But Christ has led me by the hand and, showed me how to be a dad to the best of my abilities, in which I fall infinitely short of this great calling. Now, all of this to say that, these are the things that are transformative in life and in your experience. And the fact that you don't have a dad doesn't define you. It doesn't have to define your life. It doesn't have to define what you become and who you become, most importantly. All of that centers around Jesus Christ. He is truly the one that can enable you to become the man, the father, an unwounded man, all through his great miraculous power. I pray that you find Christ, and I pray that you find a deep meaning in being a father to others, even if you've never had a father yourself. God bless.